Jacob and Grace are coming back home for the birth of their child, so you need to get out," my husband exclaimed loudly. "Get out, me?" I asked in return, to which he nodded with a smile. "I've always thought things would go smoothly if it weren't for you. I've hated people who always insist they're right, like you. There are plenty of other women out there. Despite the years we've spent together, there's no obligation to continue doing so." It was my husband who made this bold statement. Whatever difficulties he may face in the future, it's no longer my concern. He might think I'll forget about it by sleeping it off, but I won't let it end like that this time. He should take responsibility for his words. I am Charlotte Clark, 55 years old. Currently, I live with my husband, William, who is 60 years old, 5 years older than me. He recently retired. He seemed happy, saying, "I'll enjoy my retirement, taking up fishing as a hobby." On the other hand, I run a small apparel company, which thankfully brings in a decent profit. Being able to afford a high-rent apartment is thanks to this job. William has been supportive, which was a great help, but he changed after his retirement. First, his daily routine changed. With no work to go to, he started spending more days at home, leading to a more relaxed lifestyle. He would watch TV late into the night or sleep past noon. That's fine if it only happens occasionally, but it becomes a concern when it happens for several days in a row. When I suggested, "You're not young anymore, maybe you shouldn't disrupt your routine," he wouldn't listen. Instead, he'd get angry, saying, "I've worked hard all my life, let me do as I please. Don't tell me what to do." What's worse, he became idle. William had few friends, and his only hobby was fishing alone. So, he seemed bored after retiring. That's when he started nitpicking my household chores. To be honest, I'm not great at household chores. Being busy with work, I rely heavily on the latest home appliances. Cleaning is done by a robotic vacuum, and cooking is handled by electronic gadgets. But William didn't like that. A robot can't clean every nook and cranny properly. "It's better to do it by hand," he would say, forcing me to do things the old-fashioned way. At times, he would criticize the dinner I prepared. "You should cook with care, tasting as you go. It's not the same when made with the gadgets." He never cared before, but now he started imposing his preferences on me. At his worst, he'd say, "Don't always look for the easy way out, you lazy housewife." If I had more time, I might consider his demands a bit more. But I'm too busy with work to have any spare time. Really, if he's retired and has time, he should be the one doing it. When I pointed this out, William got all flustered and snapped, "Just because you're working, you think you can act all high and mighty." I couldn't help but understand why some couples get divorced at an older age. Still, I put up with it so far, thinking of all the hard work up to this point. But then, William got even more intense about something. That was the pregnancy of our eldest son's wife. Our eldest son, Jacob. His wife, Grace, announced her pregnancy. Actually, Jacob isn't my biological son. He's William's son from his previous marriage. William remarried me when Jacob was 10. Upon hearing the pregnancy news, William was over the moon. Our first grandchild. Our first grandchild. Yes, it's exciting, isn't it? I was happy too, but William's joy was beyond normal. I think he caught a case of grandparent fever. That's why things turned out the way they did. The main reason William was so excited was because Grace said she wanted to come stay with us for the birth. Grace was raised by a single mother. So, she came to us this time saying, "My mom is too busy with work." That's when my husband got overly enthusiastic. "I want everything to be perfect for the baby's arrival," he declared and started making preparations. That in itself was fine, but for some reason, he insisted I do it all. "This is the crib we need. Get all kinds of formula, just in case. Oh, and we need to stock up on diapers." He was only giving orders with an air of superiority. But I was busy with work and household chores. Even when I found time to prepare, I often got complaints that it wasn't right. No. This isn't what I said. Hey, cut it out. I get that you're excited, but if you're going to be like this, do it yourself. Stop dumping everything on me. He doesn't expecting me to confront him. He froze in surprise. This is our first grandchild, you know. To think you'd be so indifferent. Oh right, you're not blood related to Jacob. You must not care. That's not it at all. Don't say such awful things. You're going too far. If Grace knew you were doing all this, she might not even want to come here anymore. It doesn't feel like a relaxing environment. William tried to retort but seemed at a loss for words. Frustrated, he clenched his back teeth and stormed into his room. I didn't mean to go that far. William's fanaticism had pushed me too far, and I ended up saying more than I intended. And to be spoken to like that about Jacob was shocking to me too. I wanted Jacob and Grace to feel relaxed here as much as possible. That's why I had to stop William's rampage. Later, I thought about apologizing, but William wouldn't come out of his room. Reluctantly, I left for work, saying through the door, "Sorry about yesterday." I morphed to work. That day was full of work troubles, and I got home much later than expected. At this rate, dinner would be late. What should I cook? Thinking this, I arrived home to find William already sitting at the dining table, waiting. "I'm home. Sorry I'm late. I'll make dinner as quickly as I can." There was no reply from William. Just me, bustling about, and him, sitting there, seemingly putting pressure on me with his gaze. If he's going to be home anyway, he could at least make dinner. At the very least, he doesn't have to sit there, rushing me like this. Finally, I served plates of pasta on the table. "Sorry for the wait. Let's eat." The moment it was served, William started eating without saying a word. "Were you that so hungry?" I also took my seat and started eating. Before I was even halfway done, William had finished eating. He sat up straight and looked at me. "What?" I asked, and he replied in a low voice. "You're always about work, 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 neglecting the household chores." "What?" I was so surprised I almost dropped my fork. "What are you talking about? I'm not neglecting anything. Don't play dumb. Even today, for instance. Just pasta. No salad, no soup. That's unbelievable." True, I usually serve salad and soup. But it wasn't because I was being lazy today. It was only because he was looking at me so impatiently that I thought he wanted to eat quickly, so I hurried. I explained, but he didn't seem convinced. "It's not just that. You always negate everything I say or do. You must think you're better than me since I've retired and you're still working." I would never think that. No matter how many times I denied it, he wouldn't accept it. I was starting to get fed up. "Let's just stop this fruitless argument. Jacob and his family will be here soon, and I don't want to greet them with this unpleasant atmosphere." At this, William smirked. Yes. I've been thinking the same. That's why I've come up with a good solution." "A good solution?" As I tilted my head, William said loudly, "Jacob and Grace are coming back for the birth of their baby, so you need to get out." "What?" I couldn't believe he was serious, but he didn't seem to be joking. "Get out, me." When I asked again, he nodded with a smile. "I've always thought things would be fine without you. I've always hated people who act all high and mighty with their so-called logic. There are plenty of other women out there." It was shocking. To think that after decades of marriage, he would say something like this. William seemed to get carried away, his mouth running non-stop. He couldn't stop venting his frustrations at me. "First of all, you lack respect for me as the head of the household. Always complaining, when you should just be quiet and listen." "Complaining, I respect your wishes as much as I can within reason. But you're the one coming up with impossible demands. Anyway, enough. That tone of voice, acting all superior. Just be quiet and leave. I don't even want to see your face." William slammed the table. It was clear that nothing I said would make a difference now. I replied, "Understood," and went back to my room. The next morning, as soon as it was day, I called the moving company. After being told to leave like that, I wasn't going to stick around. Fortunately, the moving season was over, and I easily got an estimate and reservation. Now, I just hope to finish everything while William is out, but he is almost always home. What should I do? I was worried, but it seemed there was a God after all. I'll be going out for a bit from tomorrow. He's the type to think everything will blow over by the next day. So, he spoke to me as if nothing was wrong. Apparently, he was invited by a fishing buddy to go on an overnight fishing trip. This was my chance. Things were a bit awkward. Perhaps even he realized he had gone too far this time. Yet, there was no apology from him. He might be hoping to pretend that yesterday's outburst never happened. He's always been like that. Until now, I was the one who would act maturely and turn a blind eye. But after what was said, I can't just let it slide. The estimate for the move came quickly. I intended to take all the furniture and appliances, but it turned out to be less than I expected. The problem was finding a place to move to. But that too was quickly resolved. Someone I knew through work offered to let me rent their place. And it was a brand new building. "Are you sure this is okay?" I asked again. "But I owe a lot to Charlotte," she said, so I took up the offer. I immediately went to see the property. It was more than satisfactory, with no issues at all. So, I went ahead and moved everything while William was away. After all the verbal abuse he dished out, I had no regrets. Maybe I had been feeling suffocated by our life together somewhere deep down. The night after I moved, William called. "Here it comes," I thought, taking a deep breath before answering. "Hello, Charlotte. What the hell is this about?" Even through the phone, I could tell he was panicking. I almost chuckled but responded calmly. "What do you mean? The house, it's completely empty. What's going on?" "No. Since you told me to leave, I just did what you wanted, that's all. I took everything from the latest appliances to our favorite dining table. I just told you to leave, not take everything with you." "That's crazy." "What? Leaving it would be crazy. I bought all of that with my own money. You always said you didn't need any of it and didn't contribute a single penny." William fell silent but then said begrudgingly, "Well, fine. Jacob and Grace are coming over tomorrow. I'll go get some furniture." He'd be in for a shock when he saw the place. "Well, then it's just as well. Say hi to Jacob and Grace for me." Talking any further would be a waste of time. I quickly ended the call. There was one more significant detail, but since William hadn't noticed, I didn't mention it. The next day, Jacob called to say they were almost there. "Didn't he tell you? I've moved out." "What? Seriously?" Jacob sounded surprised but didn't probe further. Instead, I could sense joy rather than shock in his voice. "So, you're not there anymore. We can do whatever we want then. You're not coming back, right?" "That's right." I had always sensed it, but it was clear now that Jacob found me annoying. He wasn't pampered by me because he was a stepchild, and that seemed to have bothered him. "Other women are much nicer," he once said to me as a child. I had thought I was raising him with love so he wouldn't face difficulties in the future. Well, it's better this way. We don't have to walk on eggshells around each other. Grace wasn't too fond of you either, so she'll be happy. Anyway, bye. Like father, like son, always want to add an unnecessary comment. After hanging up the phone, I was thinking about all this. I was a bit on edge that day, unable to focus on work. I thought maybe they would contact me about the furniture and appliances. Grace had once said, with all these appliances, life would be so much easier. I secretly wondered if this homecoming was also aimed at that, but contrary to my expectations, no call came that day. The call came at the end of the month. Charlotte, I could tell right away from William's hesitant voice what he wanted. But I pretended not to know anything. What? It's about the rent. Yes. What about it? He was too self-conscious to come right out and say it, but he wanted to remind me about the rent. The rent for the apartment we lived in was $1,700, all of which I had been paying. William, now retired, couldn't possibly afford it. He could use his pension for a while, but eventually, it would run out. Since he called, he might as well have just said it. William mumbled and fumbled for words. He was so reluctant to say it that I had to ask for him. What? You're not going to ask me to pay the rent for an apartment I don't even live in, are you? No, I mean, you were the one who told me to get out, right? And now you're coming to me with this. That would never sit well with him. As expected, he changed the subject. Is everything okay with you? I mean, do you have a place to live? Yes. Thankfully, I've been blessed with connections and found a place. I'm living comfortably. Saying this would make it impossible for him to ask me to come back. I had no intention of going back, just to be clear. Is that so? Jacob and Grace said they miss you. I was wondering if you might consider coming back. That's something he would never normally say. He must be really desperate, but I had no intention of going back. Is that so? They both hated me, didn't they? No, they're not. Well, it's fine. I have something to discuss too. I'll come over sometime. Yes. I had a very important discussion to have for the sake of my future life. William responded brightly, great. I'll be waiting. Later, I visited the apartment for the first time in a while. It's been a while. William was dressed up unnecessarily. Dressing up wouldn't change anything. As we walked down the hallway and entered the living room, I saw Jacob and Grace sitting there. Obviously, they couldn't live without furniture. A sofa, table, fridge, and other items had been newly installed. Jacob waved nonchalantly, while Grace, though glaring at me, nodded in greeting. The atmosphere was unpleasant. I wanted to get this over with and leave. Urged by William, I took a seat. So, what's this talk about? He initiated the conversation, so I gratefully proceeded. I thought it's best to handle such matters sooner rather than later. William turned pale the moment he saw what I handed him. You're planning to divorce me? He was trembling, looking at the filled-out divorce form I handed him. Yes. Ever since you told me to leave, I've been planning on it. Did you really think I wouldn't take you seriously? William fell silent, likely hitting the mark. He tends to blurt out whatever's on his mind when he's emotional, without thinking of the consequences. This habit has caused him trouble at work more than once. I don't want to see your face. There are other women. What was it again? Anyway, after being showered with all sorts of insults that day, I couldn't see a future with you anymore. He probably remembers saying it, even if he didn't think it through. William kept his head down, sweating profusely. Yes, I said it. But that wasn't what I really meant. You can say such things without meaning them. I'm appalled. Well, it doesn't matter to me anymore. I was shocked. That's all there is to it. As I looked him straight in the eyes, he flinched and quickly looked away. Won't you reconsider? After all we've been through together. After all we've been through, you said those things to me. It's impossible. I can't be with you anymore. I stated firmly, and William sighed deeply. A painful silence filled the room. Surprisingly, it was Grace who broke the silence. Excuse me. I'm the one who's been inconvenienced the most here. I turned towards Grace, tilting my head as she glared at me with venom. What do you mean? I thought this place would be perfect with Charlotte here, a clean house, and all the latest appliances. I came here expecting to be taken care of. And now, I'm caught up in this marital strife. It's a huge inconvenience. Grace sighed even louder than William had earlier. Essentially, she was upset because her expectations of being pampered like a princess were not met. A complete misunderstanding. If she's unhappy, she can leave, go back to her parents' house, or anywhere else. Staying here is her choice. When I conveyed this, Grace's face turned red with anger. What's with that attitude? After I came all this way. I never asked you to come. Grace looked like she was about to scream. She was huffing with frustration. That's ridiculous. I was looking forward to this. I can't believe it turned out like this. Eventually, Grace burst into tears, with Jacob trying to console her. But this gave me some understanding. William's overenthusiasm for his grandchild was probably fueled by Grace's expectations. Flattered and pampered, he got carried away. But that doesn't change anything. Grace is inconsolable, and William is still sweating and frozen. Staying here is pointless. There's no point in staying any longer. Let's handle the divorce through a lawyer. The moment I stood up, Jacob shouted, "Are you running away? Leaving without taking responsibility? Stirring things up and then just leaving?" I was stunned by the sheer unreasonableness. It was the epitome of blaming the victim. I approached Jacob and stood beside him. Since he was sitting close to Grace, I naturally looked down at him. What? How old do you think you are? Huh? I'm 35. I took a deep breath and glared at Jacob sharply. So, what responsibility do you think I have? The responsibility to take care of a 35-year-old boy and his wife, or perhaps the duty to care for a 60-year-old husband. Jacob's eyes widened, and he was speechless. I couldn't stop myself. All of you are not children. Enough is enough. Who stirred things up? You trampled over my goodwill as if it were a stepping stone. You can't expect me to smile and nod forever. Please calm down. Don't act like a child now. I had shouted so much that I was out of breath. I took a deep breath to steady myself. At least, Jacob, I always cared for you, as if you were my own child. But if that didn't come across, then that's my fault. Jacob started to say something but then fell silent. I quickly grabbed my belongings and left the room swiftly. No one followed me anymore. After that, William agreed to the divorce. There were no demands for alimony from either side. He said he couldn't afford the apartment's rent, so he was going to move. William, who never did any housework, would find living alone challenging. In a letter handed over by the lawyer, written in the familiar handwriting of William, said, "Thank you for everything." He was downhearted after I refused his attempts at reconciliation. Jacob and Grace decided to return to Grace's parents' house. Grace was reluctant, but Jacob persuaded her. Once after the divorce, Jacob called me. "I'm sorry for everything. I'll try to be a parent like you," he said, sounding embarrassed. Perhaps Jacob wasn't as resentful as I thought. Maybe he just couldn't express himself. I ended up buying the new apartment I was renting, and still live there today. Work is going well. I was a bit tired right after the divorce, but now I feel refreshed. Being free from the responsibility of taking care of anyone is quite liberating. I don't know how many years I can continue working, but I intend to do my best. Of course, I'll enjoy my personal life as well. And in my heart, I quietly wish for Jacob's happiness.